Hello and welcome to a new episode of Convert on Shopify. My name is Pancho Mendiola and today Johann is back and we spoke a bunch about the symptoms of doing spaghetti on the roof testing. So it's just like testing without a reason, without a structure, without a program. And I just love this conversation. I hope you will as well. So let's just jump right in. So hey, thanks again for being back. I love picking your brain. We really appreciate sharing your time with us. And today we have a topic that also interests you as well, right? And this is spaghetti on the roof testing. Tell us a little bit about about what that means.
Yeah, spaghetti and the roof testing. Also, the other euphemism is mud at the wall, or the less polite variation of that theme, mud at the wall. But it's when you run tests without a plan, and when the tests are disjointed, they're not linked back to any strategy. They're not linked to a CRO strategy. They definitely not linked to a company strategy and overall strategy. Um, but let me give you some symptoms, because maybe all of that I've just said sounds a little bit conceptual. So listen to these symptoms, and then you might recognize some of these. So the first symptom is you are copy competitors. You are Your test ideas are basically copying what your competitors are doing. Now, I think I should clarify that what I'm not saying here is that it's bad to look at your competitors. You operate in a competitive landscape. You've got to look at your competitors.
Of course.
I'm also not saying don't draw inspiration from your competitors. I'm talking here about just blindly copying competitors and testing stuff because the competitors are doing it. Um, that's bad. The second symptom you might recognize is you're testing CRO hacks as they promote it on Twitter or LinkedIn, or you get these blog posts, many blog posts with the top 10 things you should be testing. Those best practices. If that's the kind of stuff you're testing, you are throwing spaghetti at the roof. And then the third symptom, and this is where it starts getting serious, is that your results from your testing program are uninspiring. Most of your tests, or a lot of your tests, are neutral, or flat. They don't achieve statistical significance. I'm not talking here about negative tests. Negative tests are good, but you're not getting that confident result that says it's either up or down. That's another clear symptom that you're throwing spaghetti at the roof.
All right, all right. So, okay, you mentioned three symptoms, and I really like that. The first one about your competition, you get inspired by it, but how can you manage to not fall into that precise? I mean, well, that was the second one, right? But how
Yeah,
you don't fall in that specific trap of just doing whatever your competition is doing?
yeah. So there are a couple of realities with looking at competitors. So if you copy an idea from the competitors, you might be copying a losing test. In fact, I've seen that happen.
Of course,
Um,
yeah.
that's probably kind of the worst thing that you can be doing. But how do you know that what you're copying from them, it might look good to you? How do you know that that's really effective? How do you know they've tested it? How do you know that it really works for them? Even if it works for them, how do you know it would work for you? How do you know it would apply to your segment of the population, your audience? And then to answer your question more directly, I think we spoke about this in the previous episode, so I'm not going to repeat everything I said then. I think people can watch that to get the detail. But what I'll say in answer to your question is a good way to use, let's say, competitor websites for inspiration is if you've started with a problem. So from looking at data, from talking to your customers, there's an issue, or there's an opportunity to go after, and you've considered many ideas, and looking at competitor websites and even non-competing websites, so also websites in other areas, other verticals even, just looking generally for ideas at the entire universe of ideas. But you're doing it not in isolation, and you're doing it in a way that it helps you to find ideas to solve a particular problem. Then it's I think it's warranted. It's a valid strategy.
Yeah, yeah. And the reason I ask is because I'm a Shopify merchant myself, and but I also run a development agency. So it's really really funny when I get. You would think that only startups or people that don't have any clue about e-commerce would fall into that trap, because they'll approach to you like, I want a super pretty website, and like what does that mean? Like, yeah, I want this one, like I want this exact one, right? Or I want you to copy this X brand because I and I'm like, yeah, how do you know it works, right? But you would think that it's only the super startups, but then I get approached by close to I don't know, $500,000 in revenue merchants, and they are asking exactly the same thing. Like, I'm tired of my website and I want to change it all because my competition is doing a super pretty website, and yeah, it's a like super common, and in I don't want to say in all levels, but you would think that at least in that level, approaching $1 million a year in revenue would where you would imagine, and there's already some knowledge, but we still get them.
Yeah, right, Pancho. I mean, it happens everywhere. It happens. I've seen it happen in big corporates. I've seen it happen in programs where you wouldn't expect it to happen. Really mature experimentation or CRO programs, and I think it's because it's so easy, isn't it? It's lazy, but it's that competitor porn. You're looking around and something catches your eye. It looks good. It looks like this is a no-brainer. This is the kind of thing we should be doing. And you've not thought whether this is really a problem in your site, whether it's perhaps something that might work for you. It's starting with a solution instead of the problem, which is what we spoke about the last time. And it happens everywhere. You're right.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree, and I try to give them examples with my own stores. And for example, one of my stores is ugly. Like, I say it, and I say it proudly. It's ugly, but it works. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because the target I'm reaching. Here in Mexico, we have this. There's this like fancy restaurants with the white. With the white. I don't know how you call it. The whatever. It's a fancy restaurant with the fancy chairs and the fancy tables and everything. But sometimes you are craving for something a little bit more like local and genuine. So you'll find the restaurants that have plastic chairs and plastic tables, and that for us is a reference that you don't want to, maybe you're in shorts or flip flops or you just want like a more homemade meal, and that doesn't mean it's bad. It's a bad restaurant, and normally they're freaking crowded. A taco place is just like full of plastic chairs and plastic tables. So I think that analogy applies to stores as well, and I think our store is a plastic chair and plastic table store where people expect good stuff, but maybe say a little cheaper or a fair price, and we're not the cheapest ones, but that's the idea that they're getting. But it's really hard to explain to merchants, right? Like, no, I want it pretty, and what the hell does that mean?
You know what? I think that's such a great analogy. I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to steal it.
Go for it.
And use it because. And you're right. There used to be a saying in the industry many years ago. I haven't heard it for a while, but we should maybe resuscitate it. That pretty doesn't convert. People don't buy from you because your site looks pretty, and they don't not buy from you because your site is ugly. And maybe that's an overgeneralization, but in my more than 10 years of doing this, I've seen it twice. I've seen it twice that the problem on the site that was stopping people from converting, and I've worked with hundreds of sites, twice it happened that the reason things didn't go as well as they could is because of design or aesthetics. And in one case, and that was quite recent, it was the branding was really awful. It was less to do with the with the visual appeal. I mean, that was pretty bad, but it was less to do with that and more to do with the way the logo was done, the name of the company. And when we were doing usability testing, a couple of customers were saying, I remember the one person said, this looks amateur, and the other person said it looks like somebody didn't complete the job. So it's that bad that it becomes it becomes a problem. But in most cases, it's about, as you say, it's about the product that you sell. It goes back to marketing 101. People buy stuff because they have a need. They have a problem that they're trying to solve. And the reason they're on your website or your app is they are looking at ways of solving that problem, ways of addressing that need. And you are one of a few alternatives they're considering. And different things are important to different people. So for some of us, it's price. For some of us, it is quality. And, so there are different factors. And that's why it's so important to understand your customers and to understand what is it that turns them on, what is it that turns them off, who else are they looking at, what other alternatives are they considering, and given all of that, how do you construct your message in a way that that makes your option the no-brainer, the best solution for them. And that's when looking at competitors makes sense. But it's not to steal ideas, it's to understand the entire competitive landscape, to understand the noise in the market that you have to cut through. And you don't do that by creating a pretty site. You do that by constructing a well-structured, well-argued, well-articulated sales conversation.
Awesome. I think that's like the quote of the day, let's say. Okay.
It's marketing 101. This isn't stuff that I came up with. This isn't stuff that it's not even limited to CRO. It's decades, centuries old wisdom that our brain hasn't evolved that much. And that's why it's so good to study consumer psychology and how buying decisions are made, because and it brings us back to the topic of the day, throwing spaghetti at the roof. This is how you avoid throwing spaghetti at the roof, by understanding these fundamentals, by understanding what matters to your customers, and then formulating theories about how you can improve the lives of your customers, and then testing that. Then you're not throwing mud at the wall. You're following a plan.
I agree. And do you think that part of this, let's say, issue or problem has to do with that we sometimes feel that digital is separate or different from let's say the real world or physical stores? I think we went to an era, where with this like fancy growth hacking and like everything was a hack, and everything was like a super, maybe we brought it from this like super clickbaity and funnels, like click funnels, and you need to convince the customer or like even like play with their head. We think that it's different, but I find that it's more the same. Like I try to think of when building a store, or we're building a customer service program, or even let's say an upsell or a cross-sell bundle. Like how would a normal like salesman or salesperson would do it in a physical store? So if someone approaches to me and asks something, I would say this and that, and then I will cross-sell them this and that, and that's how you manage it. It's not the other way around, right?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And we in our agency we think of the website not as a flat structure with copy and images and headlines and architecture and all these beautiful things. it's tempting to look at a website like that. We think of it as a salesperson conducting a sales conversation. And what you optimize is that you're not optimizing the site or the page, you're optimizing that conversation playing out. And to your point, one of the most interesting sources of data for me, for insights for me, and we work primarily with, or often we work with multi-channel retailers. So there's a physical store in addition to the online environment. And what we will always do is actually spend time in that physical store, because there's so much you can learn from one, observing customers in the store, looking at the questions they ask of the salespeople, and then paying attention to how the salesperson responds, and then interviewing the salespeople about what is it that gets in the way of people getting over the line, and what do you say in order to get them over the line. And Pancho, what I've seen so many times is when you then emulate that on the website, it works. It works, and the reason it does is exactly what you said. It's a salesperson,
Yeah.
a
No,
digital salesperson.
I think the reason that I have tested this is because I started with retail shops. So we used to have 15 locations from our brand. So we started this brand like 10 years ago. And in the e-commerce in Mexico just didn't exist 10 years ago. It was like way behind. So we started with retail stores, and I was the one behind the first store that we opened, and I was the one selling to the end customer. But I also was, when we opened new locations, I went to to train all the salespeople, and I will sell to the end customer. So when I created the website, I knew exactly what to say. I understood my profiles, my buyer personas, because I didn't have to invent them. I actually sold them stuff. So and this is something I say to people in that listen to my podcast, which are just starting. So if you can't manage to get your sales, your e-commerce sales started, go to an expo, go to a physical, like a pop-up store, whatever, but talk to real people and try to sell it to them, and they'll ask the right questions. If you still don't have traffic, or you can't, let's say you don't have the resources to do a proper like a focus group or whatever, just go to a freaking like a farmer's market, whatever your industry is, and just do a pop-up store and talk to people. And if that's cheaper, and you will sell stuff, or maybe you won't, and then your problem is the product or the branding or the messaging or whatever. But that's a great way to learn, right?
That's a lesson that I learned far too late in my career. That talking to customers, the results that you can produce in your business by just understanding the world of your customers, and by understanding what they're trying to get done in their lives, and how you can help them do that, what goes wrong in them trying to achieve that, and how you can help them to smooth that out. The results are mind-blowing. I mean, at first, when I started applying this before CRO, I couldn't believe the results. It was beyond what we had projected, and I was in a corporate environment then where the projections were pretty rough, pretty ambitious, and the results that I'm talking about here are dollars on the top line. It's not vanity metrics like sessions to a site. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned something else there, and there's a great quote from Steve Blank: "Get the hell out of the building. The answers aren't in the building," he says. Get the hell. Now, you don't physically have to. Of course, it's better if you physically get out of the building, but it's really just a shorthand for talk to your customers on the phone or on chat, whatever way you can do it. But that's the lesson there.
Totally agree. So to dive a little bit deeper in the first symptom you mentioned about these hacks, or one solution to fix everything, or that 3 steps to to whatever to hack your store. What's the workaround around that?
Don't do it. Um,
Yeah.
well, and the reason you shouldn't do it is because you're throwing spaghetti at the roof. I mean, that's
Of
kind of the
course.
definition of throwing spaghetti at the roof. There's no, you're doing it in a vacuum. You have no reason to do it other than somebody said this is a good idea. And a far better way, and here's the solution. And I'm afraid I think you're right about um, we live in an era where instant gratification rules the day. And, we're addicted to dopamine hits one after the other. And so it's much easier and far more tempting, and the dopamine hit is right there if you can just read a blog post and get three things to test, and you go ahead and get it. But you pay the price in the end. There's your program will probably fizzle out after a while because you're not going to get the results that justify the program being alive. The way to solve it, I'm afraid, isn't that instant dopamine hit. It's a little bit more work, but in the long run, you're going to be glad you did it. And the place to start is by asking, why are you testing? That's where you start. What is it that you want to achieve with your CRO program or your testing program? And in answering that question, how does it tie back to your company objectives, your corporate goals? What is it that you're trying to achieve as an organization that CRO or testing will help you achieve? In other words, if you execute 100% effectively your CRO program, what will be the result of that? If you understand there, then you're already a step closer, and you don't need to read those blog posts and test something and work for somebody else. And then, the second thing is what we spoke about the last time. So I'm not going to repeat it, but start with the problem. Understand the context of your site, the context of your customers, what they're trying to get done, and use that as your anchor, and listen to the previous episode for more on that. And the third thing is to then, and this gets slightly more tactical, is to understand your testing slots on your site or your app or your digital profile generally. What I mean by that is a testing slot is an area on the site where you can run a test. And you've got limited number of testing slots. And you want to favor those slots that have the highest value. And how you determine which slots have the highest value? They're the ones that have the highest traffic and the highest contribution to revenue or transactions. And there's no point running a test on an area of the site that's going to have minimum impact in the sense that it doesn't see a lot of traffic or doesn't impact revenue to the same extent. So, that's how you build it up. And then there's no need, Pancho, to kind of look for best practices or hacks that may or may not work.
All right. So we can say that the proper approach would be to start thinking in a CRO program, right? Like not a one-time fix, but like try to build up a proper CRO program.
Starting, and the way to build up that CRO program, the first question
What do you
and
want to
the
fix?
answer to this is, you put it right at the top of your planning document, is why are we doing this?
Awesome.
What is the why? Yeah, and it goes by different names, the vision or whatever you call it, but that's
Yeah.
really the question you're answering.
Yeah. Awesome. So in the next episodes, we're gonna talk about why hypotheses are really important, are like the starting point as well when once you get started with a CRO program, and also how to run a freaking program. I have a very good idea, and I want to start doing it, and I want to pick your brain with that. So thank you very much for this conversation. It was awesome.
Well, I look forward to that. And just a quick cliffhanger on the or promo for the hypothesis. It sounds kind of dull, right? And I can see that, because the problem that I often observe far too often in CRO programs is that the hypothesis step is either skipped altogether, or it's done as an afterthought, sort of a checkbox exercise. And the problem with that is it creates a weak foundation, and the rest of the process falls flat. It's really crucially important, and it's not something you want to ignore. There's a lot to talk about. I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. So thanks again.
Pancho, good to talk to you.
You too. Well, there you have it. An amazing, amazing conversation. A lot of information for you and me to digest. And so remember that if you want even more information and resources, you can head to Convert.com. Feel free to reach out as well, but you'll find tons of resources about CRO, about A/B testing, and we're here to help. So thank you very much and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.